What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. So yesterday, there was a teardown of the Nintendo Switch OLED model from Austin Evans, and even had some internal shots of the new OLED versus the current Switch, and I wanted to go over some of the differences between the two here today. Also, we are going to be talking about what appears to be a PlayStation franchise that is gearing up for return after about a decade or so, and we're also going to be talking about the Valve Index, as it appears that Valve is setting up to present a competitor to that Oculus Quest 2. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure that like button helps out a ton, and if new here to the Spawnwave channel, make sure you subscribe down below and ring that notification bell so you can keep up to date with all the uploads here on the channel. And we're going to start today with PlayStation Plus for the month of October. We can see this over on PlayStation blog. They have a nice little card here showing off the 3 titles. These will be available from October 5th until November 1st, starting with Hell Let Loose. That appears to be the PlayStation 5 game for the month. And then we have 2 PS4 titles, that being Mortal Kombat X and PGA Tour 2K21. And I saw a lot of disappointment online when this was presented, and yeah, it's certainly not a big month, not one that's going to jump off the page to you or anything. And for the most part, a lot of people learned that there is a game called Hell Let Loose when this was presented to them online. So I guess that's one benefit for something like PlayStation Plus, is sometimes you have a game thrown in there that you may have not have tried otherwise or even heard about, and you can just kind of claim it and give it a shot when you have time. Otherwise though, yeah, Mortal Kombat X is a bit older, and then PGA Tour 2K21 is a sports title that will be out of date as we go forward here. But either way, these are PlayStation Plus games, which means you may as well sign in like we talked about Xbox Live Gold yesterday, and just at least claim them and add them to your library in case you want to try them out down the road. Also, Super Monkey Ball Banana Mania is out next week on October 5th, and I'm very excited because I enjoyed the Super Monkey Ball games from the GameCube, and that's what they're leaning into here, bringing a bunch of those mini games up, remastering them in one package. And we did have reviews go live yesterday. We can see that over on Metacritic, currently sitting at an 81, which, you know what? That's not bad. I saw that, I said that's pretty good for Super Monkey Ball, which were, again, mini games that existed back in the early 2000s. Now in 2021, getting an 81, that's pretty good to me. If you go down to the critic reviews, the split is currently 16 positive, 4 mixed, with GamesBeat giving it a solid 100, and then moving down to like Digital Trends giving it a 60. But looking through a lot of these reviews, the biggest thing that I noticed is people are pointing out the fact that there's a ton of content here, and if you were someone who does enjoy Super Monkey Ball and maybe you missed out on, say, the GameCube titles, you're going to want to pick this one up just because there is so much to do. And it was even pointed out as being kind of a celebration of franchises outside of Super Monkey Ball, since remember, they brought in a lot of characters, yes, some free, some paid, but brought them in here to kind of participate in what's a fun party-style game. So I am certainly looking forward to Super Monkey Ball Banana Mania, that coming out next week on October 5th. Oh, and while we're on the topic of games coming out, there was one that released today on the Switch, and it was interesting to me to see how this would turn out. Unfortunately, doesn't look like it turned out very good. We can see this over on Nintendo Life for Darksiders 3 scoring a 4 out of 10. I have to point to Nintendo Life because at the time of this recording, not enough reviews have come in for Metacritic to even recognize a score for it on the Switch. And this is a port, of course, from a game that released a couple years ago on the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4. And some of the cons, unfortunately, point mostly to technical issues. They say it even hampers the enjoyment on every level, long load times, bugged out boss battles, frequent full pauses during action, which it's kind of an issue for a game where you're trying to string together combos and avoid attacks from enemies. And there is actually a very good video reviewing this game from Switch Up, going more in depth with some of those performance issues around Darksiders 3. And it's unfortunate because I did enjoy Darksiders 3 on the Xbox One, and then eventually playing it again, actually, on the Series X. And I was looking at this, it's $40 on the Switch, so seeing all these technical issues, I figured I would bring it up just so you can potentially keep tabs on it, see if we get some updates to smooth out some of these performance issues, and maybe then buy into it. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with this Nintendo Switch OLED model. It's out next week for most of us, although everyone seems to be getting this system early. We talked about Kevin Kenson getting one, Nintendo Prime, and even now Austin Evans. But he did do a teardown of the device, and that's something I am obviously curious about, but I'm less curious about the system. I'm more curious about that dock, because I think there could be a couple of telling things inside of that dock for where Nintendo is going to be taking the Switch here in the next couple of years. Nonetheless, though, we did get some pretty good shots of the internals on the Switch OLED model from Austin as he went ahead, took the back off, then took that metal plate to take a look at the board and kind of the layout that Nintendo has. And yeah, there are some pretty significant changes here. We can see this image from his video. I went ahead and circled two different things here from the models. Now, the one on the bottom is the current Switch, the red box Switch. The one at the top is the Switch OLED. And the part that I circled is, I believe, Nintendo taking the flash memory and sort of attaching it to the board. Not necessarily the main board. As we can see, there's two different colors there for what I would assume showing off two different boards that are mostly connected through a series of ribbon cables, most likely, although it'll be easier for me to tell when it's right in front of me and I tear it all the way down and we take a look at the chip and the board itself. But we can see it does appear to be soldered down, and from what I can tell based on this image, Nintendo has taken the current Switch and made it less modular. Essentially, there are less boards and less parts here that would be able to be separated. So like it appears anyway, from this angle, the micro SD card slot, that is part of the same board where the flash memory is, and then also the game card and even the headphone jack, which would work to kind of decrease costs with this system overall. The other thing I noticed, and Austin did point it out in his video, the heat pipe is smaller, at least thinner. Now, I'm not too surprised about this, and the reason I say that is because the Switch Lite uses a thinner heat pipe for the same chip, and this is a bit different because it will go in a dock, and it's expected, of course, to change clock speeds, move them up, and then you would have more power and all this running through it to accommodate for a higher resolution and playing it on your TV there, as they would eliminate the need to throttle more or less for battery life. But I don't believe that's going to affect much of anything, because from my own tests when I was trying to overheat the Switch, I had to do a lot. Like, certainly Nintendo and Nvidia took into account some of the worst case scenarios for this device, and the Tegra itself then being moved down to Morrico, where that 16 nanometer isn't exactly putting off a ton of heat. There was also a pretty good look at the hinges that are being used with the new and redesigned kickstand for the OLED in Austin's video, and they do look pretty serious. I mean, you can see they're metal there, and it does appear like this is going to be a much sturdier Switch when it's in tabletop mode. They also had questions around the fan inside of this new OLED model, thinking that that could have been altered alongside of the heat pipe, but the fan they're looking at is one that has already existed in Switch systems. There are, I think, 2 or 3 different fans that essentially circulate with Switch devices depending on when they're being manufactured, and I guess just what's available in the assembly line or the factory at that time. So unfortunately, it doesn't appear like it's a brand new fan, no revelation there. But I have a feeling that the temperatures will be within reason. It won't be anything too outlandish, as it does appear that Gamers Nexus is going to be hooking up a bunch of probes and testing out the temperatures for themselves. So that'll be pretty fun to look forward to here, I assume, in the week coming up as we roll into the launch of the Switch OLED. But I will be picking it up on Friday. We'll do a full unboxing, and then we'll do a full teardown of not only the device itself, but that dock to see if one of my theories is correct with this new unit that Nintendo is putting out. Next up, let's talk about a franchise from PlayStation that's been kind of missing for about a decade now, that appears set for a return, at least according to sources with VGC. We can see this over on their site, where they say PlayStation has handed its Twisted Metal series revival to Destruction All-Stars developer Lucid Games, sources have told VGC. One person with knowledge of Lucid's plans suggested that the revival would be built around a free-to-play model, partly in response to Destruction All-Stars' last-minute transition from a premium game to a PlayStation Plus title. The release is planned to coincide with an upcoming TV series in 2023, we were told, and yeah, that would place it a little more than a decade, roughly 11 years, after Twisted Metal released on the PlayStation 3. That was February 2012. So yeah, a little more than a decade there. And Lucid, to have them do it, I mean, it kind of makes sense if they are looking to make this more of a live service, free-to-play style game, one that potentially could just be thrown in the PlayStation Plus. I mean, could you imagine if Destruction All-Stars came out and it was a full $70? That seemed to be the way we were trending there until, well, a last-second change threw it into PlayStation Plus. And I mean, it got me to try it out. I didn't stick with it very long because as I was playing it, I was thinking, wow, it'd be nice if I had like weapons or rocket launchers or something else on this car rather than just ramming into other cars. And it seemed like that's kind of the consensus with a lot of people. It's almost a half step to a Twisted Metal game, and that's, I feel like, what a lot of people thought when they're playing it. This should have just been Twisted Metal. So I feel like they have the ability to get the mechanics down. It's gonna be more or less, can they get the characters and the overall feel of a Twisted Metal right? And I think this is a good direction for Sony to take with some of their franchises moving forward because they have the single player narrative-driven experience down pat. No questions there, right? But the part that they seem to be struggling with a bit right now, in terms of releases anyway, is the multiplayer side. Now, if they had Factions 2, for example, with Last of Us Part 2 right now, I'd be like, well, at least they have that. But they don't, and it seems like a lot of studios are being formed, kind of these second-party deals and partnerships in order to create multiplayer games, so they will at least come out. Will they be good? Well, we'll see. At least based on Sony's track record, we can assume they'll be good. But having something like a known franchise with Twisted Metal alongside of new IPs with multiplayer games, and we hear that Naughty Dog is working on something, it seems like Sony is at least gearing up to have more multiplayer experiences for you to have a reason, at least from the first party side of things, to be signed up with PlayStation Plus because, well, some of the titles they're pushing out now with kind of the, I guess, the quote-unquote free side of things with PlayStation Plus isn't exactly moving the needle for a lot of people based on response to this latest October offering with PlayStation Plus. So here's hoping we do find out more about Twisted Metal, the game itself, as we head towards 2023, when we're expected to hear more about the series. Next up, let's talk about Valve VR and their Index. Now, I've talked about this before. I feel like the most approachable VR headset will be those all-in-one headsets like what we see with the Oculus Quest 2, which has been climbing up the Amazon bestsellers list for quite a while, and I was thinking that might have been because of Resident Evil 4, but several people told me no, it seems like it's a better, more approachable VR headset than having to get either a console like a PlayStation, hook it up with wires, or get a PC and try to move all kinds of stuff around your room and then plug in cables. And if you can have it all in one device, you just put it on, maybe you go through a small setup and at least you're off and running. Much better, I would say, for the mainstream audience. And it appears that Valve has recognized that. While the Valve Index is highly acclaimed, people seem to really enjoy it, there is a full setup and I would say even a barrier of entry to get into that ecosystem. However, it does appear, according to multiple sources, that Valve understands this and is at least working on their own all-in-one Index headset. We can see here, for example, sadly, it's Bradley posted up a video saying Valve Deckard standalone PC VR is coming. And then to follow that up, Ars Technica backed that claim up, saying sources familiar with matters at Valve have confirmed to Ars that information in the wild is legitimate, at least in terms of products being made within Valve's headquarters, even if those products don't ultimately see retail launches. The information gleaned by Lynch points to multiple iterations of this new code-named headset, including an updated proof of concept version referenced this June, along with the ability to activate a Valve internal menu that brings up 2 new Steam VR menu options. These options, dubbed Prism and Standalone System Layer, have yet to be activated in meaningful ways, so their names and meaning remain a matter of speculation. The latter term, standalone, implies that the hardware might work all by itself, as opposed to, say, being plugged into a computer or tracked by Valve's unwieldy Steam VR tracking boxes. Now, it's also brought up here that just because Valve is working on this doesn't mean it would ever see the light of day, as R&D works on all kinds of stuff and see what they can bring to market, and I'd say 80% of it probably doesn't see the light of day, and that's from like all of these different companies. But I have to imagine Valve understands the market and how they can get more indexes, therefore more people into Steam, similar to the way we see the Quest 2 really take over things like the Amazon sales charts at about $300 for a standalone headset, much more approachable than the more high-end devices that, yes, will give you a better experience, but not necessarily a more convenient experience. And I do believe that the mainstream audience is willing to give up some of that high-end experience for a more convenient one overall. It's also worth noting that the Steam Deck was discovered in like Steam code, as well as what's being pointed out here with this Deckard headset. So I wouldn't be shocked if Valve is lining this up to compete with the Oculus Quest 2. I just like the idea of the all-in-one VR sector getting more and more competitors so we can continue to get better and better all-in-one headsets, because I do kind of believe that is the future of VR if they do want it to attach to the mainstream. You got to eliminate the wires. Some people have talked about like wireless between the headset and your PC or your console, and it does feel like you would get quite a bit of latency with how hard they are trying to push some of these virtual reality experiences. So I guess the next best thing is to scale it down a bit and incorporate an all-in-one headset. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about Metroid Dread. We had those previews come out over the last couple of days, and it looks like it had a pretty positive effect on sales for Metroid Dread, as it has been creeping up the Amazon sales charts. In fact, if we take a look here, this being the best sellers in the video games category, Metroid Dread is sitting at number 6, which places it above any other game in this category at this time. 1 through 5 is pretty much a bunch of gift cards from PlayStation, Xbox, Nintendo, and then Roblox, and then we also have a PS5 controller charger there. Anyway, after Metroid Dread, the next best-selling video game is Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. We just can't escape this game. I guess someday we'll get Mario Kart 9. Anyway, Metroid Dread creeping its way up the Amazon sales charts after those previews went live and everyone pretty much praising the game after the first 90 minutes to 2 hours isn't that surprising. I expect Metroid Dread to do pretty well in the US. Like, I expect it to be up there in the MPD charts for the month of October. The big question mark is going to be in Japan. Now, Nintendo does appear to be pushing advertising pretty heavily for Metroid Dread next to the Switch OLED. I mean, every time they show off the OLED, Metroid Dread is on it, and they even ran the whole preview event allowing press to really get hands-on time with the OLED system while playing Metroid Dread. So I almost think that even in Japan, you're going to see a pretty good sales number get posted the following week when those reports go out, because people could be heading into the stores, picking up the OLED and then grabbing Metroid Dread because it's like the brand new title to play on that nice new system that you picked up. So I do have quite a bit of confidence seeing it creep up the Amazon sales charts and seeing the amount of advertising and praise that this game is getting in previews. I think we're heading towards that 3 million mark very quickly for Metroid Dread, which means I get to find out what happens in Balan Wonderworld. And before we go to the comment of the day, we're taking a little poll I posted up yesterday, where I asked, are you buying the new N64 controller for Nintendo Switch Online next month? 30% said yes, I want the original experience. 70% said no, I'll stick with my current controller, or I'm not interested. And honestly, the 64 controller is a very controversial controller. I mean, that is something straight out of the minds of Nintendo when you look at it. But that's how we played a lot of these games back in the day, so clearly it's speaking to older gamers who have a lot of nostalgia for that era to even use that 64 controller over something like a Switch Pro controller, even the Joy-Cons, and at $50. So I understand that a lot of people are probably thinking, nah, I think I'm okay with my Switch Pro controller for now, and I'll just experience the N64 games with that. But I'll admit, as somebody who grew up playing the 64, yeah, I kind of want that 64 controller from Nintendo. I mean, really just see how close it is even to the original. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day, as you're seeing here. This is from Jake Randall saying, I think Animal Crossing could be next for Nintendo World over Zelda, but I want Zelda more. I hope they have both when I eventually go. First off, shout out to Jake. Make sure you check him out on Twitter or YouTube if you're still trying to secure a PS5 or an Xbox Series X or S or any of that. He'll give you the best shot at doing so, as he has alerts and all kinds of tutorials even on how to get through and pick one of these systems up. But I do agree with him. As much as I would like Nintendo to show up and rebuild, like create a whole Hyrule that I can walk through, or Legend of Zelda themed park, Animal Crossing, I will admit, would probably attract a wider audience we see it. It's like the best-selling new Switch title, as Mario Kart 8 Deluxe being the best-selling one was from the Wii U. But yeah, walking into a theme park that's geared around a whole village from Animal Crossing, I think it'd be fun for a lot of people, but I still want my Legend of Zelda expansion to a theme park like Super Nintendo World. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to be here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button, really helps out. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. Was the Switch OLED? Are you picking it up next week alongside of Metroid Dread? Of course. Also, what about Twisted Metal making a return? Would you like to see that as kind of like this big online multiplayer style game for Sony? And then the Oculus Quest 2 seems to be picking up a lot of steam in terms of sales. Would you like to see Valve create a standalone index to compete with it? Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.